Yeah. So I want to tell you very briefly how my book, Stories of Struggle, came about, and then I'm going to set the stage for Briggs versus Elliott with a few pictures before we talk about the lawsuit and the petitioners and Reverend DeLaine, Jay's father. So I was a journalist. I came to South Carolina after having lived 16 different places in my first 23 years. So I was a well-traveled person, and having to adapt as a child to so many different places made me right from the start either a baby reporter or a baby anthropologist. I'm not sure which, but I ended up a reporter because I was going in. I'm the kid that came in 6 weeks after school started, and you don't know if you want to meet me or not. So I had to learn about how cultures and societies work and how small groups interact. And while I'm certainly old enough to have been a part of white children going to segregated schools, because my father was in the Air Force and because Harry Truman desegregated the military in the 1940s, I did not go to desegregated schools. And so when I came to South Carolina as a reporter in the mid-'80s, I was struck right away by racial divisions. And I was interested in this and somewhat appalled, I would say, by how what I thought of was decades later, this was still an issue. In fact, I was an education reporter and I was still struggling with understanding how there could still be segregated schools. And along the way, I decided that one of the ways to answer this question for myself and for others was that I was going to have a big portfolio. Usually you aspire to go to the State House, and there you would report, as it was at the time, on elderly white men making laws. But I decided I wanted to be reporting on minorities, I wanted to be reporting on children, I wanted to be reporting on the aged, I wanted to be reporting on the poor, I wanted all of it. And so as I went around the state doing that, all of it, I met many Black elders. And these are people who were active with civil rights in the 1930s. And so it became imperative to me that I needed to start collecting their stories because I knew that death was standing right next to me and them. I was going to have to be very quick, very sincere, and very urgent in collecting these valuable stories. And I also was upset that the official story of South Carolina was that it was moderate in racial matters. This is absolutely not true. That is one of my headline messages. There's nothing moderate about this state. Among lynching countings that are going on with the Equal Justice Institute, South Carolina is number 6 out of the Deep South. They have counted at least 4,000 lynchings between the late 1800s and the 1940s, and South Carolina is right there. So that's why I start off with a man was lynched yesterday. This was a lynching flag that the NAACP started putting up at its headquarters in New York City. And they kept it up there until 1938 when they were renting their space, when they were told they would be evicted and run out of New York City if they didn't take the flag down. How they would use the flag is every time they got word of a lynching, it went out the window, which was almost every day, okay? And I should add here that Ida B. Wells did research on lynchings, and the myth that lynchings were about Black men pursuing white women is just what I said it is. It's a myth. Something like 3% of lynchings had to do with sexual relationships. They had to do with deportment, I guess is what you would call it. Lynchings were occurring because in South Carolina, if you were Black and you looked a white man in the eye, they might go after you. If you walked into the front door of a restaurant, they might go after you. If you knocked on the front door of a residence, they might go after you. Who's they? It's not just the KKK, it's the citizens of the town. I interviewed a sit-in young woman who said that when she was being booked, the man asked her, "What color are your eyes?" And she looked up so he could see her eyes and realized it was the first time in her life, she was 18, that she had ever looked into a white man's eyes. This is how strict it was and how terrifying it would be to be an African American in South Carolina. So this is very blurred because it's a 1930s no sound film. It's really a very early film. The film started being made in the 1920s. Charles Hamilton Houston came from Howard University, where he was the dean of the law school, down into South Carolina in the 1930s to film how devastatingly inadequate the schools were for Black children. This is a school that is right at, as you can see, at the railroad tracks. And 78 people, I wish I could figure out how to show you the film, but 78 people are coming out of that little building to get their picture made. They don't have school books. They don't have desks. They have 7 benches for the 78 people. They have a teacher. They rent this ramshackle building for $5 a month. And their teacher is going to be paid for 4 months. She's going to be paid $35. And that's 4 months was what the white school district people thought was an adequate education for Black children. So Charles Hamilton Houston comes down. He makes this film, which is shown in 1936. And he wants to rally the NAACP members to understand what the NAACP is going to start doing, which is they're going to start doing education lawsuits because they feel that education is the avenue to first-class citizenship and to fuller acceptance as first-class citizens. So he is documenting statistics too, and I wanted to throw a few of those at you. For these 68 pupils with their 7 benches to sit on, $5 of rent, one teacher earning $135 for 4 months, that's representative of the per capita expenses that are being spent. $58 on white pupils, $8 on Black pupils. Oh. Okay, think of that difference. Mm-hmm. So he is going to show this film all over the U.S., and he's going to be talking about South Carolina. He's going to be talking about South Carolina and how it refuses to educate people. And as a young reporter, one of the things that struck me right away is the cut off your nose to spite your face. African Americans were 36% of the population. So they're saying, the politicians are saying, and by the way, if you're Black, you're prevented from voting at this point in time. They're saying, we don't care if a third of our population can't do anything besides farm labor in terms of education, or they have to leave the state to get educated to come back to be one of the 6 lawyers that are in the state that are Black. So there is this ruthless, I want to say idiocy about how you're going to progress as a state if you don't educate all your people. So this is Reverend James Hinton, and he is one of the 400 or so Black officers in World War I. Very rare to have a Black officer. And after World War I, he's in Augusta, Georgia. He musters out there in a town that has a Black-owned health and life insurance company, Pilgrim Life, and he travels the East Coast selling insurance. He's a brilliant man. He's had Bible school training and then gone into the war, and he is someone that everybody notices. And I love looking at the pictures. Look at his eyes. You know he's going to get done what he wants to do. Look at that squint there. He's a fierce, immovable man. And so he becomes back to Augusta, where he had been promoted, and he lives in both Augusta and in Columbia. When he comes to Columbia in 1938, 1939, he becomes the president of the Columbia NAACP. And at that time, they're making an effort to have a statewide NAACP because they want multiple members to be able to have greater statewide influence. He's not too fond of this because he's got 900 members in the Columbia branch, and he thinks it's going to be diluted, D-I-L-U-T-E-D. And so he's somewhat opposed, but he agrees to become the state conference president in 1941. And man, does he go to town. 1943, teacher pay lawsuits. 1944, the Texas all-white primary is ended by the Supreme Court, which means that all-white primaries throughout the South are going to be ended. All-white primary means only white people get to vote. And that lawsuit is something that he gets going. In 1944, he is one of the people that forms the Progressive Democratic Party, which is the answer to the Democratic Party being all white. And this is the first group, the Black delegates, to go to the Democratic National Convention, not Fannie Lou Hamer decades later, but South Carolina people. And in 1947, he is closely affiliated now with Thurgood Marshall, who is the legal counsel for the NAACP, and they sue for a law school. And they luck up with J. Wades Waring, who is a white patrician in Charleston, who has become an outcast in Charleston because he's divorced his Charlestonian wife to marry, remember this word? A Yankee. So his former friends don't want anything to do with him, and this is waking him up. A lynching I'm going to talk about wakes him up. And also this desire for voting, and he understands that there's a constitutional right to vote, is going to wake him up. But his first lawsuit, where he appalls the white people in power, is when John Wright sues to go to law school. And he tells the University of South Carolina, you can desegregate and take John Wright in, or you can, the legislature can support a law school at South Carolina State, or you can close. So what they do is they found, the legislature provides $60,000 to found a law school at South Carolina State. Now think about this. Why doesn't South Carolina want Black lawyers? Because they're going to pursue this illegal use of laws, right? And what happens is the law school then becomes the place that Black civil rights lawyers graduate from. So there are some upsetting pictures coming because I want you to understand what South Carolina was like. And let me give you that warning. You're going to see 2 lynching victims. And I want to remind you that lynching is an extrajudicial murder. It does not have to be a hanging. Okay? And it can be great harm. It doesn't have to be a murder either. So it doesn't have to be a hanging. It doesn't have to be a murder. But you've taken the law into your own hands to severely damage people. This is Isaac Woodard. And he has mustered out of the same place as Hinton, Fort Gordon in Augusta. He's been on a bus. He's going home to South Carolina from Augusta, Georgia. He asked the bus driver to make a stop so that he can go to the restroom. And by the way, he's still fully in his uniform. And the bus driver refuses to. At a certain point, he comes from the back of the bus where Black people are required to ride to the front. And he says, I am a man. Treat me as a man. I have asked you to stop the bus at the next stop so I can get off. When he gets off, the bus driver goes and recruits the police chief, Linwood Shullett, who beats him so severely he gouges out his eyes. The next morning, Shullett takes him to the Veterans Hospital, and then relatives come to get him. Hinton knows everything going on in the state. He hears about this right away, but he can't find Isaac Woodard because he's been moved from the jail cell. And think about this. This is like a firefighter running into a building on fire when Hinton goes to where there's a lynching. He can't find Isaac Woodard. And when so they start looking for him, and they're confused. They think he may have been in Aiken, not in Batesburg-Leesville. Orson Welles, the famous movie star and director, has a radio show. Hinton and McCrae, who is a newspaper man who works closely with Hinton, they ask Orson Welles to tell the story. And you can find this on archive.org. Orson Welles sang in his beautiful voice, which I can't imitate, "We're going to find you, Mr. Policeman. We're going to find you," and goes into what happened. And he does 3 shows on this. And through that, and a soldier who was on the bus hears, he comes to Hinton and tells Hinton about where Isaac Woodard can be found. Woodard signs an affidavit as to what's happened to him. And on August 18th in New York City, there's this giant fundraiser because the nation, not South Carolina, but the nation is appalled at this. Billie Holiday, these are all famous people. Write their names down and go look for them. Billie Holiday, Cab Calloway, Woody Guthrie, Milton Berle, Paul Robeson, white and Black stars are coming to raise money for Isaac Woodard. But of course, his eyesight is not going to be returned. This is him being escorted up to the celebration and collection of funds for him. This is George Elmore. George Elmore becomes the next really important lawsuit that's going to prepare the way for Briggs versus Elliott. He is an entrepreneur. He is a taxi driver. He's a store owner. He's a photographer. He goes with Hinton to photograph the corpses when they're lynching, so he's a brave man. And for a couple of years now, since Smith versus Allwright, Hinton has been trying to get Black people registered, because if he can get someone registered and then they're turned down when they show up to vote, they are a registered voter that's been turned away and they've got a lawsuit. So one day, several people, including McRae and 4 or 5 others, are standing across the street from where there's a registration book. And so at this time, registration books could be in stores. They could be just almost anywhere, churches. And so they're trying to figure out when would be the perfect moment to go over there and ask to get registered. Some of them have already been turned away. They know the woman who's in there with the registration book is probably going to refuse them, but they're going to try. George Elmore comes up and he says, let me try, because he's often mistaken as white or Cuban. And so he goes over and she says, we got to register you. There are all those people over there trying to get registered. I'm not going to register them. We got to register you. You white people, you got to get registered. So he writes down his name, and then she turns the page. He's got his name in the book now, and he writes down his address. Now he's got his address. He's registered. She looks at his address, which is Black neighborhood. And she says, oh, you are, and you can fill in the word here, fine, go tell on your friends. And that's how 6 people in Columbia get registered. And we have the Elmore lawsuit, in which he sues for the right to vote after he's turned away for voting. So as all of these stories go, all of these lives go, it's year after year after year. So that's in 44. The lawsuit is not decided till 47, but it is Jay Wade's Waring again, and he opens the primary, making South Carolina, as is its want, the very last state. It's the very last state when Clemson's desegregated too, the very last state to end an all-white primary. Waring says, rejoin the Union. He's referring there to the Civil War. Rejoin the Union, it's time. So South Carolina appeals, and it says that the Democratic Party is similar to Forest Lake Country Club in Columbia, where you have to be accepted as a member by the elite. So instead of the Democratic Party being a party that people can use as an affiliation to vote for people in different offices, it is instead interpreted as being for the elite, accepting the elite to vote for the elite. So the federal court, when it's appealed, says, no, these are constitutional rights. And so then what South Carolina does is it designs a segregation oath. So if you're Black and you come up and you have now registered to vote and you want to vote, you're going to have to also sign a segregation oath before they'll let you vote. So they go back to court. This is Hinton and Thurgood Marshall over and over again through the NAACP funds. And this time, they're back with Waring. This is Brown versus Baskin. He says, anybody that violates my law is going to jail. This is the first time he's ever threatened these white elite with jail. They're going to be held in contempt, and they're going to go to jail. So let's see if I can get the clicker to work. This is Reverend Hinton getting ready to vote in 1948. And this line, if you had multiple photographs, it would go down many, many, many blocks. So this is Willie Earl. He's a lynching victim in South Carolina, February 16th, 1947. He was a truck driver who developed epilepsy and lost his job. A taxi driver is stabbed one night, and he does not name Willie Earl. All he says is that a Black person has been in the taxi with him. He doesn't identify the person. He's in the hospital for a day. Throughout that time, he never names anybody, but he does die. The taxi drivers decide they know that it's Willie Earl. They go and collect him. They take him out near a hog slaughterhouse, and they literally slaughter him. And the white that you see is in the Black funeral home where they're rebuilding his face before his mother sees him. Strom Thurmond is the governor, and he doesn't really like lynching mobs. He is, of course, a white supremacist, a segregationist, but he doesn't like lynching mobs. So the FBI comes in. They locate 31 taxi drivers. 25 of them confess. 25 of them confess. All of them are found not guilty because the white judge says you can only confess for yourself. You can't confess for the other people. And what they're doing is they're naming this person did the slicing with the hunting knife. This person shot him with the gun. And so since they can't implicate themselves, they're found not guilty. And this is them celebrating. This is an article that you can find on the internet where the New Yorker has kept some historical articles up. So they're acquitted. 3 businessmen, 3 people are dismissed from the case. Nobody's found not guilty. They're celebrating here. They would bring their wives and children to the trial. It was a social occasion. Dame Rebecca West, who was British and a famous reporter and historian, had just been at the Nuremberg trials, and the New Yorker felt it made sense to take her from the trials on the Nazis to come to Greenville. And one of the phrases that stuck with me from this is she said that when she talked to the white leaders in Greenville, that they said lynching is a social prophylactic. What they mean by this is when they're not happy with the way African Americans are behaving in their town and someone does break one of their rules, then a lynching will remind them that they have no control over their lives. So this is the situation that the Briggs petitioners are going to step into. This is a photograph by my friend Cecil Williams, and I have a second book that's just come out with Cecil where I'm writing about his civil rights photography. And, oops, sorry. This is Cecil. This is his best friend, Bunt Sultan. All these children that you see here who are blonde with white skin and blue eyes have been identified in their town as Black because of who their parents are. And so unless they go to another state, unless they go to another country, they're going to live their lives as Black in South Carolina. So South Carolina had what was called the one-drop rule. So essentially, if you were 1/16 Black, meaning your relatives had come from Africa, but then through rape and other assaults and through consensual acts, perhaps, but rare, white people had made Black people white. Okay, and Reverend Hinton says this when there's a white supremacy legislature, and they bring up this trope that Black men rape white women, and he says, no, the reason we are so many colors is because of white men. So I want you, I know this is all kind of horrifying, but I want you to be thinking about this. What is race? What is race? So here's your mother.
Yes.
Yes.
And my sister's on that picture also.
Okay, so this is Maddie Belton,
Right.
DeLaine, and Helen Richburg.
Right.
And this is their school, Spring Hill Elementary.
That's right.
And want to say something about your family and teaching?
Excuse me?
Would you like to say something about your family and school, or should I carry on?
Well, my father at that time was pastor of Spring Hill Church, and my mother taught there. The church is a white building in the background. This was the Masonic Temple and the school. Now, in those days, schools for Black children in rural settings were either built by money that the Blacks got together and donated, or in this case, the Masons had a temple there, and the first floor was used for a school. And Mrs. Richburg was the wife of the pastor, well, not at that time, but later on, of the Liberty Hill Church, where most of the activities for the Briggs v. Elliott case were realized.
Okay, so this is a Liberty Hill school.
Yes.
And is that your father over there on the far side?
Yes, this is my father. He was teaching at the Liberty Hill School at that time, and two of his sisters were also teaching there at that time.
Okay, so this is Reverend James Armstrong DeLaine Sr., and he's attended Allen University, become a teacher, and he's been ordained as an AME minister. And one of the things that fascinated me as I was doing my research is most of the NAACP presidents are ministers and educators. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. If you're a Black minister of the Black church, your parishioners are not going to fire you when you do civil rights, right? And we're going to find a lot of people later that are being fired from their jobs. But also, as a man of God, you have some protection as a man of God. But everybody we see here is going to get fired from their job during the Briggs petitions. This is the white school. Okay, this is the white elementary school. So the schools for the white children are much like the schools, except for computers, that you would see now. They have water fountains, they have air conditioning, they have heating, they have indoor bathrooms. The children in the Black schools have discarded textbooks. They are bringing water from wells and buckets into the school. They're bringing wood or coals to an oil drum in their school. As I mentioned before, they're sitting on benches. They have what were called earth toilets outside, no running water. And this is how they're expected to become literate. And here comes one of the people who's going to make a difference. So I mentioned that Reverend Hinton and Thurgood Marshall have been pursuing lawsuits, and they have become united in changing South Carolina. And because Thurgood Marshall is such a brilliant attorney and funded by the NAACP, and because Hinton is this ferocious leader of people in South Carolina, you've got this great team. And Cecil Williams that I mentioned before, he's about 11 years old. He goes down with a small double lens camera, which means he's going to be seeing the image flipped. He's looking at it up like this. It has an attachment for a flash bulb. Flash bulbs cost $1, which would be about $15 now. So he has one flash bulb. It's 4 a.m. The train has come in from New York. Thurgood Marshall is stepping off, and this little skinny kid goes click and gets this beautiful picture. Gets this beautiful picture, which is in many museums now. Someone asked me, why is he startled? I said, well, he's got this little kid with this apparatus flashing the light at him. So Cecil has started what is the only civil rights museum in South Carolina, and he has got a replica, not the suitcase, but a replica of the Samsonite suitcase that Marshall was going all around town with. And you met Thurgood Marshall several times for meetings,
Yes.
Briggs, right? What did you think of him?
He was a gentleman, a very affable gentleman, and I think very approachable. Not someone that you would expect to be on a pedestal,
Right.
if that's what you mean.
Yes, he dined with people.
Regular guy.
Yeah, he dined with people.
Yeah.
He drank with people.
Yeah.
He played cards with people.
Right.
And that would include the Pearson family we're going to talk
Right.
about, some under trees outside. But he snuck into South Carolina most of the time and snuck back out because one time he was at Hinton's house. KKK came, dragged out Hinton, said, we're going to lynch you, Thurgood Marshall. And he said, no, you're not. I'm not Thurgood Marshall. But Thurgood Marshall was in the house. They've been playing cards. So now we're at the beginning of Briggs versus Elliott. So previous to this, Levi and Hammett Pearson have equipped a truck and then asked for a bus and been refused because their children are walking 9 miles into town to go to school. And I walked 9 miles with some kids many years later. It's a long way. It's a long way. And this is on dirt roads. This is when dogs aren't fenced. This is a dangerous, demanding walk. And they have failed at this because the school district has just laughed them out of the building every time. Thurgood Marshall has agreed to file a lawsuit with them. And I call it shady shenanigans. There was always some trick that they would come up with. And the trick they came up with was that James Pearson was, because he was going to high school, and there were only like 6 high schools at this point in time, he's going to high school in one district, the farm is in another district, so they can't sue because it would be representing the wrong school district. So they have not succeeded at that, but they're not going to quit. And so in June 47, there's a meeting with Harold Woolweir, who is one of the 6 Black attorneys in South Carolina, who is going to become the local counsel, and Hinton, and many of Jay DeLane's and the Pearsons' family members to talk about what to do next, right? And Thurgood Marshall has his doubts about this because he's seen how poor and vulnerable people are, and he's not sure South Carolina is the best place. And they're very anxious about getting the right lawsuits in the right places. And they have succeeded now with several higher education lawsuits where they've been suing over and over again for law schools and winning using the 14th Amendment. And so the fear is because of Plessy versus Ferguson, which established in the 1890s, separate but equal, that they'll lose in the Supreme Court, and then it's over again for however many decades. So they're anxious about who the petitioner is going to be. This is the case that has all the cameras that are like this big in it that little Cecil is carrying, and he's working with E.C. Jones from Sumter, who is a photographer. And I'm sorry that I keep doing that. Right up there, this is Harry Briggs, Sr. And he is going to be the person who opens his house for the petitioners. And over here is one of my favorite people, Robert Georgia. You'll meet a little later. So all these people have come to church to hear about the possibility of suing. So I want you to hear what the 14th Amendment says, because it's an issue again. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. And so if you're in the black school versus the white school, you do not have equal protection of the laws when it comes to education, do you? No, you don't. So this is where they're heading, but it's a terrifying journey because of all the physical and economic repercussions, and because this is home. So this is Harry Briggs and Eliza Briggs. Many of the people who are going to be involved in Briggs versus Elliott are veterans. And you should keep this in mind, because World War II was a powerful engine for this movement. Because when World War II veterans came back to the United States, many of them were lynched because they were Black men in uniform. And here's Harry Briggs, who's been off to World War II. Matthew Perry, who became a federal judge, would tell the story that he's never got over this experience of he's in the military. He's hoping to go into a restaurant, although he knows he's probably going to have to go in the back door. And what he sees is prisoners of war inside the restaurant. So he's a soldier defending America. He can't go into the restaurant, but the prisoners of war can. And here's the petition. So how do we get to here? Part of how we get to here is with Jay's father. So Reverend DeLaine is
Can I clarify something here?
Yes.
This is a petition
for equal everything.
Not the one that the Supreme Court, that was filed for Briggs v. Elliott.
Right.
But prior to that.
You can see the date here. It's November 1949.
Yeah, which was equalization of educational opportunity, which really meant the same thing as separately equal, and you don't have it.
Right.
So I'd like to clarify, because people think that that's what went before the courts. No. The other thing I wanted to mention to you was what on a previous slide we were talking about the decision to have a suit down there and Thurgood Marshall's hesitance. This wasn't Thurgood Marshall's real hesitance. This was pressure on him from the board of the NAACP. Clarendon County was a poor, unknown county, and they could not raise funds in the name of that county that would be adequate for a suit. Therefore, the NAACP office and their board did not want to take a case from the county, or from Clarendon County. Technicality with this, I'm sorry, a technicality with this is that the NAACP did not go out looking for cases to file. They dealt from the bottom up. The people in the community had to recognize what they want, and then they appealed to the NAACP, to the state body, the president, the head of the NAACP at that time, Mr. Hinton. As well as I know him and his children, I forget names now because I'm getting at that age where I'm forgetting mine sometimes. But the appeal came from there, and my father masterminded and coordinated the efforts of the people on it. And they then went to the state body, which was meeting in Charleston I think this is 1949, requesting that action be given to them, and they wanted to meet with Thurgood Marshall and present their ideas. They were granted that meeting, and that was in March of 49 when they met with him, and my father took 7 other people from the county to meet with him in Columbia. And they were told by him that the recommendation was not to support anything from Clarendon County because they couldn't raise money for it, to execute the plan. When the people that were there with my father responded in that meeting, they changed Marshall's mind. And when he went back with a plea that I want to take the case, I want you board to approve it. That then became the impetus for the action that took place. And out of that they came home to get instructions on where to go from there, and being over anxious, they jumped ahead of Marshall and developed these names for a plan for equalization. And when they presented them, it was like, no, we have to step back. We need something tighter than that. Then they were given parameters on what they wanted to do about a site. And they decided that that Somerton was the optimal place because the differences in the white schools and the black schools, there was a drastic difference in comparison and opportunity, more so than Manning or the northern part of the county. So that's why the lawyers, made a decision that that's where they wanted plaintiffs from. And they wanted those plaintiffs narrowed to one person from a household that had a child in, at that time, District 22, which was specifically Somerton Schools and the Liberty Hill School. That eliminated anybody else within the county from participating as a plaintiff.
Let me step in here and say what happened, though, with these petitions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay?
Yeah, I just wanted
So,
to, I didn't want to take it over
thank
from
you very much. So,
Okay.
so there are, as it's so wonderful having him here. There are 2 petitions, and people get confused about that. But this petition becomes public, this Equal Everything petition.
Yeah.
And it's printed in the newspapers. The petition's names are put up in the courthouse in Manning. And so Harry Briggs is fired from his job at the gas station and given, it's Christmas, he's given a pack of cigarettes and sent on his way. Every person here loses their job. If they're a sharecropper, they're kicked off their land. If they have a loan for farm equipment, or remember I pointed out Robert George, I'm going to show you him again later. If they have mules, they have seed for crops, the debt is called in because people would borrow to plant and then pay back. Anything that was associated with a white person that had power over you, it's gone. And so Nathaniel Briggs, who's the youngest child, who still speaks about this, talks about how he lost his father. His father had to go to Florida to support the family. So he feels like his father was taken away with that lawsuit. Eliza Briggs was working, this was a route to Florida, was working as a housekeeper in motels. She's fired from one, she goes to a second one. The motel owner there says, I'm gonna have to fire you here too. They tell me they'll cut off my water if I don't get you out of the motel. The Olivers, Mary Oliver and her husband, they're running a restaurant, and they do voter registration there. They load up jukeboxes. They have multiple businesses. What happens with them is none of the distributors will have anything to do with them. And so Mr. Oliver is driving down roads at night with his headlights off to get to the jukeboxes alive. And he dies before the second petition, but he tells his wife, you sign this second petition. He knows it's coming because I want you to be, and he says it in all capital letters, a woman, which I just am so fond of that instruction. So one of the other reasons they're 20 is because they're looking for people who can survive this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so they go from 107 adults and children to 20 adults and their children,
Yeah.
right?
I was thinking, and even though some of them did not survive that were selected in the 20, that was the group that they felt was safest from any harm,
Yeah.
but they were
So,
also subjected to it.
so look who's next. This is your brother.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted you to see some of the sweet children who are aspiring to a better education. This is Brummett DeLaine, BB, who became an educator and lived in Charlotte. This is B. Brown Rivers. She had a hand in finally Somerton becoming a national park. It's now part of the national park. It was all in Kansas because it was all about Brown, not Briggs. And so she's active in that. Her father was a custodian in the schools. And this is Willie Stooks. He was one of the early petitioners, another veteran. Also someone who...
May I make a comment about him?
Oh, of course.
This man lost his life because of Briggs v. Elliott. When that petition that she showed just was shown a few minutes ago, when that was underway and the firing of people, he and Harry Briggs worked at the same shop. To make a living for his family, he attempted to repair cars at home, and the lift fell on him and killed him. His 7-year-old daughter discovered it.
She saw it.
She saw it.
Yeah.
And before she died last year, but for about the last 10 years, she's been out of the sight of most people because of dementia. And before that dementia, she said to me that after she grew up and kind of looked back over the years at what she saw, there was no accident, that was murder. That has stood out in my mind ever since I heard that about this man, her father.
We do have time, and we'll get to this, but we are going to talk about a murder of James McKnight and,
Yes,
the
yes.
attempted assassination of his father.
No.
So this is the family. At the end, they finish the school year, and then they go up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to live with relatives. So now we're at petitioners, and let's see who I should point out to you. I think I'd like to point out the Pearsons. How about that?
Excuse me?
I'm going to point out the Pearsons. So the Pearsons are up here, here, and here. So Levi and Hammett have not had any schooling. They cannot read. Their children read. They listen to the radio all the time, and their children read to them. Their children are World War II veterans who are very active with their fathers in this effort for the bus, and then the support of what continues. So that's why they're
As you
included.
name them, I'll try to find it and point them out. Who's who? If you
Okay.
would you like that?
Okay.
Okay.
So let's see. Here's I'm so sorry, folks. This is Robert Georgia again, right?
Excuse me?
Robert Georgia.
Robert Georgia.
Yeah. Right here. Yeah.
Right here.
So you can see it better.
Okay. And then this is Pearson.
Yes, that's one of them.
I think that's Levi, and next to him is Jesse
Yeah.
and Ferdinand.
Right. Now, Ferdinand and Levi are brothers. Jesse is the son of Ferdinand. And this over here is the wife of this person on the end. Yeah. Where's she?
See, that's Eliza Briggs, and that's the
No, not.
yeah.
Let's see.
So up there, right? Would you?
Yeah, she's.
Yeah, which one you want?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm half blind myself. There she is, right here.
Yes.
She's a Pearson. also.
Yeah, Charlotte Pearson, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Charlotte Pearson. This is one of the Pearsons' Jesse Pearson's children. There's another one, and that one is one of Jesse Pearson's children.
Look up. I'm sorry, this is a dangerous place up here.
Oh, good. It fix itself.
I may disappear in a poof of smoke at any moment.
Okay.
You're good.
This is another picture that Cecil took as a child with his mentor. It's outside the church. It's at twilight. The flashbulbs are at play again. And if you look up at the very top, this is Reverend J.W. Seals, this is Reverend DeLaine, and this is Reverend E.E. Richburg. And they were so important. And this is Charlotte Pearson again. And here are the Pearsons. In keeping the lawsuit going, because you trust your minister. Your minister is going to support you and not lead you into difficult situations that he won't protect you from. And so Reverend Seals has a job teaching veterans. He's fired from that. The KKK regularly surrounds his house and shoots into it. He's raising a grandson. He sends his wife and his grandson up to New York City, another family broken up. But he stays to support Reverend DeLaine. He considers himself Reverend DeLane's co-pilot. Remember that, Jay? The co-pilot. And on the right side, Reverend E.E. Richburg is out in the country at Liberty Hill, and that is one of the places that they meet because it's out of town and it wouldn't be as noticeable when they're meeting. This is Harry Briggs again. This is Eliza Briggs again. This is their daughter, Catherine, and this is Harry Briggs Jr. Okay, so they celebrate at the beginning, after the first trial. So the first trial is, why I'm saying the first trial is because this is going to go on and on and on, going back and forth from the Supreme Court. But these are sort of some of the dignitaries. This is Reverend Richburg again. This is Majeska Simpkins, who's the state conference NAACP president. There's Reverend Seals. There's Harry Briggs. There's Reverend DeLaine. This is John McCrae, who I mentioned before. He and Hinton are a team in investigating the lynchings. He's a newspaperman. This is Flea Boyd, who's a supporter from Manning. This is Reverend
He was
Hinton
president of the NAACP at that
in
time.
Manning, right? And this is Reverend Hinton, and this is Eugene A.R. Montgomery, and he has a
Yes.
dangerous job. He's the field secretary, and he was going up and down those dirt roads trying to find petitioners. And you know, there aren't that many people with cars, so if you're driving you're a black man, you're driving in a car, just like now, you know, there can be problems. So they celebrated, but what happened was the 3 panel judges, 2 of the 3 said that, well, the state of South Carolina is going to try and make things equal. We acknowledge they aren't equal, and so we're just going to fix things. And there has been a decision before this, as Jay was mentioning with the NAACP meeting, not only at the state conference, but in Atlanta, that they were going to go for everything. And Jay Wade's Waring says, go for everything, because you can appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court when you're denied. And so they are denied by 2 judges, but Waring writes, segregation is per se inequality. In other words, you separate people, they cannot be equal. And that actually is repeated in the Brown v. Ward final decision. So some of the influences are actually kind of hidden, aren't they?
Yes. Mhm.
So this is Jay's family and their house. You want to say?
Excuse me?
You want to tell them about the house burning?
In an effort to stymie the movement, it was decided by the governor of the state that the main thing would be to get rid of DeLaine, because he was really the one that was running things. And so there had been concern at that time about his safety and our safety in living there. This was in 1951 when the house was destroyed. I was at Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. I came home and we took that picture a couple of days afterwards where the house was destroyed. Now, it's interesting because I was going through some papers yesterday and I ran across a court document that I had filed for trash and didn't realize that this thing was in there. And it was a document of the lawsuit against my father by the black principal of the school at the time when his house was burned. When my father went to to report the fire and file for compensation on insurance, it had already been paid to the white board members in town for a lawsuit filed by that principal where he filed claiming my father slandered him.
Yes.
And we were never reimbursed by the insurance company for this fire. That was paid to them. And I'm sure that particular man who was principal of the school probably got $15 or $20 out of it, and the rest of it went to them. But that's what the insurance company did.
So Reverend Goats,
Just ask a question real quick. Miss, and if you let everybody know what fire department.
The fire department refused to put the fire out because the city line was about 15 feet over from the fire. I get carried away with this thing. But they sat there with the fire trucks but did not put the fire out.
yes. So we're going to look at a few more pictures, and then we want questions. So we're gonna
Okay.
kind of wrap up. But one of the things you might want to ask is what other things happened to his father, because there were many efforts to end his father's life. So this is Robert, Georgia. His mules are taken away from him, but because this is a united front now, his neighbors collect money to buy his mules back. He sells vegetables, and he needs his mules to pull the wagon to sell his vegetables. I interviewed his son, Normel, who told me that when it was time for Normel to register to vote, his father recruited people with rifles to get Normel to and from the voter registration location so he could vote. This is when Brown v. Board is decided. So this is the Columbia Record, the afternoon paper. South loses in court, segregation must go, time to mix is what they called it, put off. This is the State, which was the largest newspaper at the time. Supreme Court outlaws school segregation, long delay seen before decision in effect, which is a story in itself. The Supreme Court said, well, we're going to have to figure this out. So they came back in 1955 and said, local officials can kind of decide. I'm being very fast and casual here, but it put things off, okay? So there was a decision, but then there was the putting off of it. This is 1956, so 54 is the first decision, 55 is the second. The White Citizens Councils Forum, which are considered the KKK in business suits and ties. They come to the Township Auditorium in Columbia, unfurl the Confederate flag, and celebrate how they're going to stop people from desegregating schools. And they are all very active in this, continuing what had happened with the Briggs petitioners, which is firing and chasing people out of town. On the stage, this is Senator Eastman from Mississippi. Behind him is Thurgood Marshall. Next to him is Mendel Rivers from Charleston. And next to him is Saul Blatt, who is the Speaker of the House. All these men are going to serve for decades after this, and they are white segregationists. This is the ladies of the KKK at the State House. At this point in time, if you were Black and you walked across the State House or the University of South Carolina grounds, you could be arrested. But the KKK could come form a human cross, march up and down town, and then hang out afterwards. And here they are hanging out. So South Carolina didn't fully desegregate until 1970 when a judge in Greenville said, no more federal money. And then it slowly started desegregation. So think about how we've come from the 30s to this moment, which is 56, and then we go into the 70s and the 80s. So again, I think it's very strange. Told you I was going to disappear in smoke. It's very strange to me that a community of people is willing to deprive itself, as well as others, of the opportunity of an education and the ability to further everybody's goals. But this is what was going on in South Carolina. And Jay's father, his family, and these other faces that you've seen, these other people, they were all so brave. They're the true heroes of America. And I would like to wrap up by saying how I came to this story was when I came to South Carolina and I started reporting and I met these elders and I started hearing more about Briggs versus Elliott. I thought, there's an anniversary coming up. Let me go see what this been written about them. What do you think I found? Nothing. And I thought, how is this possible? Everybody agrees Brown versus the Board of Education is the most important Supreme Court decision in the history, counteracting Plessy versus Ferguson. How is it that no one's writing about the petitioners? How is this possible? And so I went down to Somerton, and Annie Gibson, Maisie Solomon, and Eliza Briggs were still alive, and they connected me to relatives in the North, and out of that came the first section of Briggs versus Elliott. But think about this, you know, it's like probably the 90s, the 40th anniversary, and I can't find a story in the biggest newspaper in the state about these heroic petitioners. So another part of this is, who do we sing praise to? Who do we sing praise to? And one of them is right here. So I'm sure you have some questions of Jay, DeLaine, and me. They'd love to accept questions from you.
No, I question and comment. First, Mr. Lane, what was the name of your church?
Liberty Mutual.
Oh, you mean for Reverend Hinton?
Now for the house.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, another question. One of your students asked me, two of them, and I didn't have a chance to talk to them before it started, but asked me about, did I know Thurgood Marshall? Yes, I've met him. I don't say that I personally knew him that well, but I've met him on several different occasions. Now, my brother, which you saw here, is younger than I am. So they're 3 years younger. So I was old enough to remember these people. I knew quite a number of them. Mr. Elmore, all of the NAACP people I knew. As a matter of fact, one picture was shown up there of Mrs. Okay, all the name right now. But she was an NAACP official, but my mother grew up with her. Majeska Simpkins. Yeah. So I knew them. I knew Judge Waring very well. We were invited to his house for dinner on Christmas of 1951. And after dinner, I think he pointed a question out to me for some small talk. And I gave him a blunt answer. And that question was, why did you decide to go select Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte as a college where you want to go? And I told him I didn't select it. I was forced to go there. And my father could have killed me from across the table with looks at his son. But I really didn't care because I would do that to them quite often. And so he then said, well, you know, I've got connections in Howard. If I can get you in there, would you transfer and go there? And I told him no. And he said, why? I said, because I don't want to go there. Well, where do you want to go? And I told him where I wanted to go. Lincoln in Pennsylvania. Why did I want to go there? 10 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line. And so he said, well, I don't have any connections there, but if I can get you in, would you transfer? And I said, very quickly. 3 days later, he called and he said, tell my father, your son has been admitted to Lincoln with full scholarship, and they're waiting for his application.
A little backwards there. Pretty
So
cool.
I transferred from Smith in Charlotte to Lincoln in Pennsylvania. And that was because of Judge Waring.
You have another question?
Well, not another question or comment, but Um, and we've talked, all of us have talked, and we've talked over the years, talking about 8 years ago. And so kind of what we're doing, I think, is a quick explanation. Now I'll come to it, but there's a program called National History Day that's throughout every state in the country. And we're doing a performance. And there's other categories of what you can do. We're competing to see how to do performance. Well, when I was in high school, maybe Bill, they was met those watching that the movie came on to. I remember watching
Separate but equal?
yes, separately, and so I've been always intrigued about this, and as a history person, I'm intrigued, but also ashamed at effort in South Carolina not to be what South Carolina should be. And so we went to Somerton when we first started doing History Day 15, 20 years ago. I was in Mountain East guys. And we met a lot of people. We visited places. I thought it was important to go to Scotts Grant, to about town in Summerton Intermediate School in Clarendon County. And things are definitely, and we recently redid that. Okay, with this group. There was a meeting at the historical Scotts Grant High School 2-3 weeks ago. And a lot of these people and relatives and some of the people that you named were there. And I was kind of like the person, people that was there, and there's a lot of questions. And so I keep asking the question, why isn't there a museum? Because when we first started doing this 15, 20 years ago, I mean, I can imagine and physically imagine seeing a sign on the I-95 corridor that would say, welcome to Somerton, birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement. And there was another photographer there the other night. And I got her name written down, so I'll tell it to you when I pick of it. But she also took pictures during this time, and Mr. Williams the other night. And I mentioned that a lot of those individuals who was a good student, in my opinion, came up to me after. And so I told him which I think it should start. And then that was probably 4 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we went to Orangewood, to Mr. Williams' museum, a shame that the state of South Carolina will not construct that museum, because that is history. You have living history right here. That one day all of us are not going to be here, and you're losing a primary source because of stupidity in our state. And I'm sorry to get on what person at times, especially when I get to national about something. And and all history is important in South Carolina. What Mr. Williams said to us was that, and I don't remember the dollar figure I have it written out. It was at least $1 million. All history is important, but the state of South Carolina has decided to spend at least $1 million. He said early next week, up them an exact figure to start an ethnic museum in South Carolina. But Mr. Williams went to meet with our state official, not a leader at state official, not specifically who. And he is yet to get a return phone call, and it's I couldn't show him when he calls. And definitely he said that it should be an Orangeburg to Columbia. I mean, it would be okay to move to Columbia. It's obviously be an Orangeburg because of, and like I said, we're in 1968, South Carolina State. And so, he continued to talk on and on about this. And so he did a performance to next Saturday at Columbia on this. We've done it before, and the last time, different people, and you have to win your region for the region to the state competition. You win a state competition, you go to the national competition, which is at the University of Maryland. And Mr. DeLaine, my brain, it's some of my old, your brain, it's just bad sometimes. Your grandson, I met, he came to our event, and I can't think of his name right now, but he was in the audience.
My brother's grandson, probably.
I can't.
What was his name?
I can't remember. I'll call you and tell this, but he came to the event, and I was just explaining, as I continue to explain to them, historical significance of this. And I wish that I had a USB could put your ear could evaporate because this is unreal. But there's enough people in this state like you, man, and like so many other people that have more mouth than I do that can make these things happen. And there should be a museum at Summerton. And as the lady, and I'm going to say this, the photographer's also like, and she said this. She said, can you imagine the economic development when it would bring to the state also more important with Summerton? It would change the perspective. But unfortunately, so many people, young kids at Summerton did when we first started, and now they're not thinking about this case. And then, because I specifically asked them questions geared towards whether or not things knowing that. But I guess it wasn't really a question we could talk at least about.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some questions.
How to get your time back.
Oh, sure.
Say more good.
Yeah, thank you. That's
I'd like to
exciting.
kind of address some of that, but I don't know if we have time.
Before you do, let's take the questions.
More questions
And then,
bring up so that way people please
yeah.
go for us each inventory.
Yeah, so there was one here and one over there.
Just reading up the steps codes, who you are, what your organization is, what good fits with it.
Okay, I'm going to get your information to I will speak really fast. I mean, this job, that's what I am afraid of in South Carolina. I will have hats there. I love this street. It's a war movie. It's called the National, South Carolina National History Day. I typed to look at exactly where it's, I think it's at Denmark, the West London area. We don't put the time for what the time next week. But it's a group, senior group performance. I'll get you the information. If there's anybody else, I would love for y'all to support us. And as far as the organization, I just have a love for fly fingers. But I would love for us all to get together forward.
And there was another question.
What one is the mix. It's interesting that you mentioned the law school at South Carolina State. I'm a former vice president at Allen University. We taught law at Allen University also. I was wondering if anybody knew if those folks contributed anything to the case from Allen University.
No, they have not. Now, I want to answer the question. I'm going to try to be nice. I'm not against you, but I don't want to be too blunt against South Carolina. South Carolina's people. I won't tell the truth. We have an organization in Summerton, Briggs, DeLaine Pearson Foundation. And we're just at the point now, after almost a little over 10 years, that we've been trying to get a building there so that we can become more effective in the community. Getting the money for the building has been hell. And when I say hell, I'm talking about nobody wants to grant money for brick and mortars. So you're going to have to get that from donations. We got some money and we got the building halfway up. Half of the board members died. That was a problem. Getting qualified board members that understood what nonprofit organizations was all about and not raising money to put it in your own pocket. We've been through hell on all these subjects. And part of it, as I said, the permits. When we first started, nobody has to go back and check for water, what do you call it? Water ground, water tables. That was settled back in the 30s. Wetlands, yeah. We had to go back and pull records from the 1930s where the Army came through the U.S. and determined what was wetlands and what wasn't, and deny the fact that this was wetlands we were building on. Well, that had been settled in the 30s. But we had to lose time on this. and money. Even here recently, when we're trying to complete the building within the next couple of months or so. And something comes up about, well, before you pave that driveway, you better ask your neighbors if they like it or don't like it. That has nothing to do with it. So we spent, what, 3 months on that? Holding up the delay of work.
Certified letter, but we know that response.
Right. So that is one kind of difficulty that we run into. Another kind is that you look at your community, do they have qualified people to run these organizations? And I would say there, we did not find them. The people that we had 10 years ago that started the vitalization on this program were primarily out-of-state descendants who came back and tried to do something. Now, most of them are dead, but me. I think I'm one of the few. Well, Marguerite, yeah, she was involved in a couple of years younger than me, though. She wants to be 10 years younger, but not that much. But here, and we finally got, which has been our salvation, a distant cousin who was a lobbyist in Washington, who's got contact all over the place, and a graduate of Clemson, started bringing in people that she knew who didn't know anything about this, but they soon found out and wanted to help us preserve it, and they are helping us. And that's how we've gotten to this point where we've got a building that's coming up now. In addition to that, we're finding people in the local communities that are now qualified and understand nonprofits. We didn't have that earlier. And we have to look at all of these kinds of situations on anything that you run an effort to get involved in. Once you get qualified people who understand your problems, that's half of the battle. Because now even I was not a nonprofit man until I retired and moved to Charlotte, and all of a sudden I get elected to a 12 community board for revitalization. And it was like me starting all over again with things I didn't know anything about when you talk about nonprofits. And I stayed there long enough to learn a little bit to help here before I resigned, because I went on to the federal commission by appointment of the president for the 50th anniversary of Briggs. But I knew nothing about it before then. And you've got to find people that understand and know what these things are like before you get involved. Fortunately, we have now gotten to the point where we got people not only that are interested in the local community, from the local community, and some of the expertise that we need that we can proceed with the building. But all of these things have to be available in order for you to make success and going forward and telling your story. Otherwise, people are going to put you down and they're going to ignore you until you can get the right people that understand in your management and present with programs that will help us overcome that situation.
There you go.